At Thanksgiving, my sister rose, tapped her glass, and spoke as if she were receiving some grand award. Mom and Dad are signing the house over to me. Emily gets nothing. The room erupted cheers, whistles, even someone shouting, finally. About time. I didn't clap. I didn't blink. I just smiled the way you do when a storm is approaching, knowing the roof will never be yours. I set my fork down. Dad, I said softly. Do you want me to tell them, or will you? His face went pale. My sister froze. And in that instant, everyone sensed something significant was about to happen. Before I dive into the silence that followed, tell me, where are you listening from tonight? It matters to me to know there are people out there who've experienced families like mine. My name is Emily Nolan. If you'd met my family before that Thanksgiving, you might have thought we were close. The kind of Midwestern picture-perfect family you see on holiday cards, matching sweaters, smiling in front of a tree, pretending we never raised our voices. But families like mine don't shatter with loud arguments. They fracture quietly, in subtle choices: who gets heard, who is overlooked. For as long as I can remember, I lived in that quiet space, noticed only when someone needed something. Jenna, my younger sister, never knew that space. She was the golden child, bright, outgoing, effortlessly charming. The relative favorite everyone adored at gatherings, called a natural, a spark. I never resented her. I just realized early that my path would have to be carved out by my own effort, because nothing would ever be handed to me the way it was handed to her. Growing up, I watched my parents shower Jenna with attention, like she was a delicate plant that needed constant care: dance classes, summer camps, private lessons, things I was told we couldn't afford when I asked. Later, when I moved to Chicago for work, they called me selfish, as if choosing independence meant abandoning them. Meanwhile, Jenna stayed close, visiting every weekend, seamlessly fitting into the perfect mold they'd made for her. Still, I kept returning home for the holidays, mostly for my grandmother. Evelyn Nolan, sharp-witted, silver-haired, the only person in the family who seemed genuinely proud of me. When she hugged me at the door, it wasn't out of obligation. It was a recognition. She'd tap my cheek, whisper, "You're stronger than they think," then slip back into her chair as if she hadn't just filled me with enough courage to last the year. This Thanksgiving felt different before it even began. The air in the house was heavy, expectant, like everyone had been let in on a secret I wasn't meant to hear. Mom moved around the kitchen with that tight-lipped smile she wears when she's hiding something. Dad wouldn't meet my eyes for more than a second. Jenna kept brushing lint from her dress, though it was spotless. And when I entered the dining room, I noticed one more detail: an empty chair next to mine was gone. Not moved aside, not pushed back, completely missing. I should have realized then. You'd think an empty chair would be a clear warning, but in my family, signs are always quiet before they erupt. I sat anyway, smoothing my napkin on my lap, pretending not to notice how conversations dipped whenever I stepped into the room. For a brief moment, the room went flat, as if someone had hit mute, then resumed with forced laughter once I passed. Jenna floated around like she was the star of her own parade, adjusting the table, perfecting the centerpiece, whispering small suggestions to Mom that made them both smile. Occasionally, she'd glance at me with a tight, polite grin, hollow, distant, like I was a coworker she tolerated rather than a sister. It wasn't always like this. For years, Jenna and I were just two kids, sharing a room, slipping notes under the door when we were supposed to be asleep. She used to braid my hair, swipe my sweaters, beg me to drive her everywhere once I got my license. But somewhere between high school and adulthood, things shifted. She settled effortlessly into the role my parents had carved out for her: the golden girl, the perfect daughter, while I quietly slipped out of view. The house situation had started 6 months earlier, long before the Thanksgiving announcement. It was a sticky Saturday in June when Mom called me, asking me to come home for something important. No details. No warnings. When I arrived, they guided me straight to the dining room, the same table where everything would eventually unravel. Dad had a folder laid out in front of him like it was a presentation. Mom's smile was too wide, too practiced, as if holding it hurt. "Sweetheart," Dad began, "we're refinancing the house. Just a simple signature, better rates. You won't have to worry about anything." Even then, Something in me tensed. My family never asked for help unless it meant more than they were willing to admit. I flipped through the papers, heart racing, trying to make sense of the numbers. Something felt wrong. Too many pages, too many blacked out amounts, too many rushed explanations. Can I take these with me? I asked evenly. My lawyer should look at them. You look beautiful, Mom said. Jenna is going to be so happy you're here. The way she said Jenna, not we, told me everything. Inside the dining room, the table was set. Extra leaves, polished glasses, every chair full except mine. My grandmother caught my eye from her usual spot and gave a subtle nod, as if she knew more than she was letting on. Sliding into my seat, my hand brushed against my bag, the papers inside, proof against denial. If this dinner was meant to be a performance, I wasn't going to play the quiet extra anymore. When my sister rose and tapped her glass, I already knew the curtain was about to lift on a show rehearsed without me. Jenna stood there, glowing, her hair perfectly curled, the necklace from our grandmother catching the light as if it had been chosen for the exact moment she was about to claim. Mom and Dad are signing the house to me, she announced, voice bright enough to carry across every plate and glass. Emily gets nothing. The room exploded before the words could even settle. Cheers, loud claps, a few whistles, the kind of laughter people use when they think they're celebrating something good. Someone actually slapped Dad on the back. Mom dabbed at the corner of her eye as though she were witnessing an engagement. I didn't touch my glass. I didn't even blink. I just looked at Jenna and smiled, not wide, not warm, but a smile that carried the weight of everything I wasn't saying. Then I set my fork down and asked Dad, should I tell them, or will you? The effect was immediate. The room fell into a silence so heavy I could hear the radiator ticking. Dad's hand slipped, his fork clanging against the plate. Jenna's expression tightened. Tell us what, she demanded. Relatives leaned in, sniffing out the drama. My grandmother exhaled sharply, as if waiting for anyone, to end the pretense. I reached into my bag, pulled out the folder, and set it in front of me. I didn't open it yet. I let it rest there like a quiet threat. Before you celebrate Jenna getting the house, I said evenly, you should probably know the condition it's in. Dad tried to intervene. Emily. Not here. Why not? I cut in. You weren't embarrassed when you signed it over to her without telling her about the debt. Heads turned. Conversations froze. Jenna stiffened, as if someone had pulled an invisible string inside her. What debt? She snapped. I opened the folder. A stack of bills, payments, and overdue notices stared back. I slid one page forward to the summary, bolded for effect. They're behind on payments, I said. On 2 mortgages. The second one was taken out without telling anyone. They're months from foreclosure, maybe weeks. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Dad reddened. Jenna blinked, stunned. That's not true, she said, voice rising. They would have told me. I met her eyes steadily. Did they tell you, I asked, that the house comes with over $100,000 in debt? That if you sign those papers, you're responsible for every overdue payment and every penalty? Something shifted in her face. Uncertainty crept in. Dad tried again. You're making this seem worse than it is, Emily. We've got it under control. Aren't you? I lifted another page. Because this one says the bank doesn't think you're managing anything. He lunged as if he could snatch it from my hands right there, in front of 20 witnesses. I pulled it back before he could touch it. Stop. Mom's voice was pleading. Please, not today. Why not? I asked. You picked today. The relatives shifted in their seats. Some fidgeted nervously, others leaned in with fresh curiosity, and a few scowled, clearly unhappy to be dragged into a scene they hadn't anticipated. Aunt Diane spoke first. Daniel, she said sharply, is this true? Dad didn't answer. His jaw tightened as if it might snap. Mom hid her face in her napkin. Jenna's gaze flickered between us, but I pressed on. They told you the house was mine, I said softly. It was never a gift. It was their way out. They needed someone to shoulder the debt. First, they tried to trick me. When that failed, they chose you. Jenna froze in her sequined dress, trembling. Her fiancé, Tyler, shifted back slightly, as if unsure how close he wanted to be to any of this. Is she lying? He asked. My parents. Mom sobbed. Dad didn't even look up. That was enough for Tyler. He pushed his chair back and stood. You told me the house was paid off. You promised a clean start. Jenna reached for him, but he stepped away. You expect me, he said, voice caught between anger and disbelief, to start a life on a sinking ship. Tyler, please. He shook his head. I'm not marrying into this. The room collectively gasped as he strode past the turkey, past my stunned parents, and out the front door without a backward glance. Jenna's knees buckled. She collapsed into her chair, hands shaking, mascara streaking down her cheeks. For the first time in years, she looked like the little girl who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares. This isn't my fault, she whispered. I didn't know. I know, I said quietly. Dad slammed his palm onto the table. You ruined everything. I stared at him. No. You ruined everything the moment you tried to pass your debt to your children like it was a gift. You're tearing this family apart, Mom. It was already broken, I added. I'm just done pretending the pieces don't exist. A low murmur rippled through the relatives' agreement, disappointment, judgment, the kind that cuts sharper because it comes from those who saw everything. Grandmother rose slowly, gripping the table for support. Her voice, though frail, carried more weight than anyone else's. I raised you better than this, she said, looking at my father. Your daughters are not escape ropes for you to cling to. Dad recoiled. Mom sobbed harder. Jenna finally lifted her gaze toward me, hollow-eyed. What do I do now? The question hit harder than she realized. Not because I had the answer, but because she was finally asking the right person, not the parents who built her illusions, but the sister they'd shoved aside. Before I could respond, there was a sharp knock at the door. Heads turned. Another knock, louder this time. Dad frowned. The door opened, revealing a woman in a plain suit, badge clipped to her belt, expression calm, unreadable. Mr. and Mrs. Nolan, she asked. I need to speak with you regarding your mortgage records. The room erupted again, this time in disbelief. Mom nearly crumpled. Dad went pale. Jenna clutched the edge of the table as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. I remained still, breathing slowly, watching the truth finally settle where it belonged. Why is she here? Dad whispered, voice cracking. The investigator didn't flinch. We received a report of potential financial misconduct. I have a few questions. You could have heard a pin drop. Not a single cheer this time. Emily, Mom sobbed. Please, tell her she's mistaken. I didn't answer, not yet. The truth was just beginning to unravel. As the investigator moved through the house, everything holding my parents' carefully constructed world together finally shattered. She asked measured questions about payments, overdue notices, the second mortgage, and each answer they dodged made the room feel smaller. Relatives drifted back, away from them, like stepping away from a fire. Jenna sat frozen, hands trembling in her lap. She wasn't angry anymore, just hollow, drained of every color. Grandmother stood behind her, hand resting on her shoulder, steady and silent. When the investigator left with the documents, the house sank into a heavy quiet. Mom reached for me. Dad muttered that I had humiliated them. Neither apology nor blame landed. I grabbed my coat. Don't go, Jenna whispered. I'll still be here. Just not for their lies anymore, I told her. In the weeks that followed, everything shifted. My parents were forced to confront the layers of secrecy, excuses, and debt they had piled up. The house went on the market. They moved into a modest apartment across town, quieter than ever. No more grand announcements. No more golden child illusions. Jenna began therapy. She called often, sometimes to cry, sometimes just to sit in silence over the phone. She told me she finally understood why I stopped letting our parents speak for me. As for me, I realized something I should have learned years ago: telling the truth isn't betrayal. Hiding it is. And families built on denial eventually collapse. If you've ever stood alone at a table full of people who claim to love you, tell me, where are you listening from? And after hearing my story, what would you have done?